This is AV SuperFriends Off the Rails, an almost regularly scheduled open discussion on audio and video in higher education. We'll sound off about our most brilliant ideas, our dumbest mistakes, and everything in between. And because this conversation will almost certainly go off the rails at some point, we'll end up covering just about everything else. And now, the AV SuperFriends. For July 2nd, 2021, it's the AV SuperFriends Off the Rails. Welcome back, everybody. Time for another Friday afternoon podcast adventure with the AV SuperFriends. My name's Chris Dector. I'm joined today by Rachel, Justin, Mark, Jamie, and Larry. Jamie, I just noticed, has wandered off somewhere. Jamie will be back soon.
He'll be back at some
took
point.
July 4th vacation early.
Yeah, so it's July 4th weekend. This is notable because I figured people would have all sorts of conflict, but no, we are all here. That's how much we love doing this show. We have canceled vacations. I had to go dump water on the fireworks that are lit right now because this is more important.
Got our priorities right, finally.
This is higher priority than others. I would say, though, I hope everybody has plans for doing some family stuff, doing some cookouts and some barbecuing, and maybe, just maybe, celebrating America's birth by blowing up a small part of it.
Oh, yeah.
That's how we do it.
Seems right.
So, let's do a show since we're here.
Might as well. Might as well have a conversation.
What we've got on the docket for today, we're going to discuss control systems, as exciting that is, but we're not going to discuss the control systems that you're thinking of. We're going to discuss other control systems. We're going to discuss PTZ cameras, or maybe some that don't PT or Z in the same way you're thinking. But first, we do have a little bit of news. So this came out, 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, that Biamp has purchased a company called Neets, which is a Danish company that makes control systems. That Biamp is basically showing interest of kind of closing the gap on their product line, and now they can create an entire ecosystem where, from control to audio to video, that they have a modern AV system across the board.
At least it looks like that. It looks like that.
Well, I think that's the impression.
It looks like a touch panel. Yeah. We'll see if it works like one, right?
It's a user interface of some sort.
Yeah.
Do you envision them like Shure bought STEM audio a couple of months ago, and they're rolling that out as a brand within Shure, but the idea being that they can say, hey, IT department, this is not for full AV integrations. This is for, I'm going to crank out 50 conference rooms in our new building. Now Biamp can do the same thing and say, we've got, here's your little interface, here's your plug-in for your AVB transport for video, and we've got microphones and processors, and you're all set. I mean, is this a thing? Where do we see this going?
I think that's the dream. I think the one-stop shop, get it down to even as close as you can to a SKU per room for a simplified system is kind of where they're looking to go. But I think that's always been the missing piece of what their offerings were, was like that UI human interface piece.
Especially after they purchased or acquired, or whatever you want to call it, Community. That kind of completed their speaker line. So you see that from a lot of manufacturers trying to get that holistic approach of buy everything from us for your classroom kind of thing.
I think it's interesting how all these manufacturers are simplifying the offering so much that it kind of takes the integrators out of the equation at this point.
What?
Like, you can buy a complete system from Biamp or from Shure or somebody for a conference room, and those used to be like easy bread and butter for the integrators to go in and do huddle spaces across the building. And now, I mean, you can't buy direct, but you can get these somewhere else, and it really simplified the entire process.
But that's actually a good thing, I think, in the end. I mean, there's how many other variants that are doing that same thing? How many other audio companies out there are also getting into the control game because they decided, this is Wild West enough for us to jump into and have some success. And so why not? Why not offer your clients a simplified solution as being a one-stop shop where you're not relying upon third-party programming to make their product work?
And I think Biamp's been, I think, this is my opinion, that they've been stalling on making this jump for a while because most people think automatically to touch screens and touch panels and GUI design, and there's just another level of complexity there that Biamp's not really been, as far as control interface, has been known for. I mean, think about their little wall plates over the years, their knobs and buttons. And Neets, they piqued my interest a few years ago. I saw them as like a little side booth somewhere. but never enough to buy any of their stuff. But I really like they have that little e-ink panel, and they've had these little things. It's like it's simple enough, and it can do enough. And I think Biamp was just in that boat where we don't want to create a whole nother GUI interface. We don't want to. I mean, how do we port Canvas or DaVinci or whatever, or Reno, whatever their products are,
Jamie,
onto a
years
touch
ago
panel?
they had that version that ran on iPads, but you had to create yet another interface.
Yeah,
and it was never designed to replace going into Canvas or something like that. It was designed to be this like secondary in-room kind of advanced control panel, but it was kind of like their first maybe dipping their toe into a user-friendly GUI front end. So maybe this will kind of complete that.
And I think this is a really cool fit for them, because I do think it falls into a lot of Neets products falls into that category of knobs and buttons, right? People, especially in a lot of our cases now, knob and buttons, wonderful. I mean, we've talked about it on the show multiple times. So I really think, and there is the touch panel aspect there. I'm curious to see how much they integrate that rather than just the other things, because I think the other things, for a lot of times, they're more than enough for what I need. So I'm curious. I'm interested in how they leverage this, because I think it was a missing piece in their arsenal, and I think they're trying to plug that gap. I mean, there was rumors of other control companies, but I think this one fits. I like this one. So
I think that
I'm curious.
They are positioning themselves to be more than just a DSP manufacturer. Clearly, right? They have some video pieces. They have the collaboration space. They have microphones. I mean, everything is there, and they don't want to be seen as just a DSP manufacturer anymore. And they're looking at that as the holistic thing. What do we need to have? We need to have the complete user experience from the point of contact all the way out. And so there is clearly a gap there, and that this fits that gap pretty clean.
But can they make up the head start that the other companies have in this range? I mean, QSC is the one that jumps out at you, and they're a couple years at least ahead of the pack.
Well, I'll tell you this. So from the integrator side of things, using a Biamp simplified solution with a very simple touch panel in a high school gym is money, and QSC may or may not be a little bit more expensive or maybe out of budget because it does more perhaps, or maybe it doesn't. So I mix a lot of QSC and Biamp and other things depending on what the job needs. Mm-hmm. So it kind of depends on the scenario.
I don't know if they're interested in catching up and jumping to the forefront as much as just saying, oh, hey, look, you already have, I mean, most of us in our schools, we might already have hundreds of these little Biamp systems that, like, I still have 40 of them run by old AMX stuff, like first version Netlinks things. But if I could go in there and put on this little bitty Biamp add-on and still turn on a projector and make a video switch, that's all I really want. I think that's what they're looking at here. I don't think they're looking to replace Crestron Extron. Now, maybe 10, 15 years, right? Big picture. But I think in the near term, I don't know if they're even looking at let's crush QSC's idea. Because let's face it, there's some point where there's all of these driver interactions, all of this custom script and crap that you have to know how to do. And sometimes it's just easier just to bypass that altogether and have a PJ Link's box in your DSP software. Just put it in there and it routes it automatically. So
I think on this one, Jamie, you're exactly right. It's their goal is not to try to become the new Crestron. Their goal is to, do you need 25 conference rooms that your IT department, as we talked about a minute ago, Larry, I think it was you brought up, like the integrators aren't going to get involved in this because you can buy this stuff through, CDW or somebody directly, set it up on your network and off you go. And do you need someone to do that? And do they want to do that if they're going to be cranking out a bunch of really basic conference rooms where those margins are going to be super low to start with because they're probably using TVs from Best Buy and a basic system like this that just gives a little fancier interface for a Zoom room or a Teams room is all they really want. So maybe that's what they're going after. There's certainly going to be a lot of that business out there. If nothing else, the last year and a half has shown if you have conference rooms in your space that don't have that capability, you best get on it. So maybe something like this is a good fit for those people.
And this is, I think, is also a strategic announcement that we're going to see them fill in the gaps over the next 2 months, so that in October, when we all get together again, in Orlando, it's loud and clear. This is what we're doing.
Here's our room package.
But right now,
and
I think
SKU.
this is just a strategic announcement that just says, "Hey, look, we're interesting," and later on, we're going to find out what they're really going to do.
Right on. I like it.
Well, yeah, I think we want to talk a little bit more on this topic, but before we do that, Mark, push that other button there.
There's a great new digital magazine from Higher Ed AV Media found at higheredav.com, and we do a special monthly show where we actually stay on topic. It's a show where we try to really focus on a single topic and break it down into AV SuperFriends style. That's AV SuperFriends on topic, found at avsuperfriends.com, higheredav.com, iTunes, Amazon, Spotify, Google, and wherever else you get your podcasts from.
All right, so rather than going to kind of a slightly different topic here, we're just going to kind of pick up where we left off because this is deliberate. That
Why
news
not?
story,
Because we can do that.
because we can. This is our show. We do what we want. That news story kind of leads directly to our first topic of discussion here, which is about control systems. But again, not the control systems you're thinking of. So I guess the way I phrased this was there's a lot of these smaller companies right now that are, and maybe it's not fair to call them second tier control systems, but maybe we need to think about how we want to define that. But control systems that are not made by Crestron or Extron. Earlier on, we were talking about this. There was this third company called AMX. Hey, remember this company called AMX? Remember when they existed? Yeah, I haven't seen them. Yeah, or Panja when they had little panels. So for the three of you still using them, hey, congratulations. You probably all know each other. But there's a lot of interest in these kind of more streamlined, simplified deployments that don't require a full control processor. They don't require a proprietary touch panel control system that requires a programmer who has gone through specialized courses and proprietary languages. So we're seeing them from, as we just saw we just talked about with Biamp buying Neets, probably getting into that. But there's also STEM, which sure snapped up a year ago or so. Atlona has an interesting control system. QSC has some fantastic stuff going on. If you haven't looked into that, very, very interesting potential there. Neat out of Norway, they've got these little panels. So there's a lot going on. So in these, and I think they're all kind of positioned as here's your basic conference room, but a lot of them will do more than that. And the question is for cranking out a bunch of classrooms in a new building. What do we think about this? Is this an alternative? Because we're all Crestron or Extron, or I don't know, anybody use AMX, but Jamie has some AMX still.
You just said there's three people out there. There's three people out there.
And Jamie's one of them.
But if we have these existing systems on campus, what do we think about getting away from them and trying out some of these other ones, which do exactly what we need at a dramatically reduced cost and support infrastructure?
Well, check this out. We've got 2 control systems deployed that we support, Crestron and Zoom.
That's
complete
the interesting
silence.
One. Like that Zoom
Digesting
rooms.
that. We're just taking
Everybody
it all
thinks
in.
I'm an idiot. That's fine.
But Justin, you're running
That's
the
okay.
Zoom rooms on a Crestron panel, though, right?
No, we use iPads.
Okay, so you're using the old school iPad ones. All right.
Yeah. So because the Zoom rooms are this pre-canned thing that our higher-ups want to see, we have our Crestron programmer doing the JSON code.
I was going to ask you,
and
are you doing JSON on
making that stuff work. And the USB controlled cameras are just kind of plug and play, and you set it up and cross your fingers, and that's that. So there's talks about doing different things and custom scripting in Zoom, and now we're getting to a Crestron level anyway. So what are you doing, right? I mean, if it's plug and play, but now you got to do custom code, then it's not plug and play anymore.
That's what I was about to ask. I mean, what's the point? If your Crestron guy still has to code, then what are you really gaining?
It's a pre-canned thing, so it's more like copy and pasting, and since it's coding,
if you do your Crestron code right too, it's copy and pasting.
Thing, yeah.
I mean,
I think that I've had several, like in the last couple of weeks, I've had several discussions with some of the other institutions in Missouri that maybe in the other larger metropolis areas. And this came up because, one of them, no, just to the north of that, Springfield and St. Louis and Columbia. We won't name the institutions, but I think you can figure it out. But I've been talking to them, and just this last 2 weeks, I just happened to have meetings with them, and they were asking because, like at UMKC, I use primarily Extron and Crestron, and I'm just waiting for all my AMX to be rebranded to Smart Things so that it can run my refrigerator. But it's never going to happen. But I've been asking, and they asked me, well, why did you choose Extron? And, I gave them why. And they said, well, we've been looking at Zoom rooms. And I said, why? Without going into what we discuss here, I said, why? I want to know what you think before I give you my opinion. And a lot of it is that they don't have like an integrator firm. And what they really liked about Zoom Rooms is that all of the programming languages that their programming nerds already knew. Like their support people. And so that was attractive to them. Now, what they were struggling with is how do you deploy these? Just because the language is the same, how do you deploy Dante? I can write the code, but I don't know what it's really doing. So that they were struggling with that part. And then they were talking about, which fits into our conversation today, like the Atlona, the velocity systems. And I said, well, why are we looking at that? Because we tried it. I've had several systems of that. I put in one, and it's kind of falls into that same bailiwick, right? That folks that are from the desktop or networking support services, it's a web page, it's HTML. Or it's Java, or it's things that they already knew how to deploy quickly and easily, and they understood the language. They didn't have to learn the language. They just had to learn what our widgets do. And that's what the feedback I was getting, and I found that very interesting because I see it from the other way, right? I'm like, sometimes learning the language, the special language, because you already know all the other stuff. It was that strange, we got to come in the middle because I already understand how all the other crap works. And so I got to figure out the language. That's my understanding is debatable. But
I've always had
okay.
I've always had much more success teaching AV guys how to program than programmers how to do AV systems.
And
I don't know. Our programmer was a programmer. We taught him AV, and it's worked out really well.
Everyone I've trained, it's been the opposite. Our
programmer came from working on assembly lines and all that crap. But anyways.
Larry, what do you think the holdup has been, though? What do you think the cognitive break is between doing programming and doing AV systems?
I think you need to understand systems. And really, I come from a background of I used to program AMX, Extron, and Crestron. Those languages aren't that difficult. Like the entry point for our entire industry is so low. Like I could teach my grandmother how to program most of those things. Like they're not hard.
And we'll be doing that live at InfoComm.
She's dead, so that might be hard. But I'm just saying,
teaching her to program is not going to be the impressive part. It's going to be reanimating her corpse.
I just think
that's a logistical issue, not a programming issue.
If we're trying to grab programmers and we're taking them from the industry, A, we're going to have to pay more.
Yeah, you're way overpaid. Yeah.
Yeah, and B, that's not the barrier, I think, to what we do. The barrier is we're trying to take complex systems and simplify them so that anyone can walk up to a panel or get the room to automatically work. And that requires an understanding of the system more than the language.
I absolutely agree with that because many of us have these templates that we put in. Maybe it's a PC, a video switcher, a DSP, and a projector, right? Now, those 4 or 5 products can do like a jillion things. So how do you make them all do all of the different things? It's same 4 or 5 products. And a programmer says, well, they're all the same products. They all do the same thing. Well, no, not really. This one, I'm going to make it do this other thing. So I agree. But I also think that a lot of these, like we said earlier, second tier, which I don't think is fair, It's fair and it's not fair.
Yeah, it's not a good term. We need a better term, but it's like not one of the big guys. What would because I don't want to say they're less capable, but they're not maybe as well known.
And so this is our apology to those folks that we're not you're not lower class. You're just the next level.
And it's okay to be different
of size of company size. So, but I think that's the beauty of some of these. Like what I really liked about the Atlona one is that it really was meant for the simple stuff. It really was meant for the person who didn't want it to do anything more than it was supposed to do, which is what turned me off. Eventually, that's what turned me off because I couldn't take anything and make it do anything. However, one of the reasons that attracted me to even look at it, and these other schools that I'm talking to, they're just doing the very bare necessity, and that's what's attractive to them is that you drag the thing in, it creates the GUI, and off you go. And it kind of sounds like, what QSC's trying to do. Drag your thing in, it automatically makes the GUI, and you're off and running. And it's interesting.
But something you said is my biggest concern with all of these, and the reason I really haven't strayed too far from the big ones.
It's because you have
If I'm doing I drink the Kool-Aid. I like the swirly Kool-Aid. I like the other Kool-Aid. I like the Kool-Aid.
Cutting in line for the Kool-Aid.
My biggest concern is if I'm doing an entire building, I want to do the entire building with one solution. Yep. I don't want to have a system that gets me 90% of the way. I can do all these rooms, but this active learning room, I have to have a completely different skill set to support, a completely different skill set to get it up and functioning. And if these solutions can't do everything from the conference room to the 160 seat active learning room, it doesn't work in my environment.
My biggest concern, Larry,
that's the big boy use case, is avoiding the Tower of Babel, right? Yep. Like if you go with our solution, you will never need a completely different solution for another space. We have something that will work in there. That's their whole value prop.
Unless you don't have the money.
And I'm guilty of the, well, hell, why not? I got to support it anyway. I'll try it.
So I think that perspective, though, is important, Jamie. That support perspective is really where it always comes down to our decision-making process. Is call it pot committed or whatever it is. Like we're so far down a rabbit hole for us to change course now and add another product out there that our students have to now be aware of, another web page, another design criteria, whatever it may be. It changes everything and it makes the support side more difficult. Not to mention our space for storage for spares and things like that. On our shelf, now I have to have different products where with another manufacturer, I can have all the same kit of parts and create the same experience, right? We haven't really talked about it much here, but a lot of our larger manufacturers offer programming language as well as transport. And some of these smaller ones don't necessarily always do the transport. They may do a language. Some of them do the transport as well. But those endpoints and the management of those endpoints and the stocking and the spares and the replacements, there's the value to me. Like knowing that I can go to a one-stop shop and have it be on the shelf. It's the same part number all the time, and I can use it in different ways. But if all of a sudden that breaks, like I may be accomplishing the same thing, but the back end of it becomes much more difficult.
My biggest concern
I think
with
some of these
guys, we have to listen to Justin's biggest concern. He's been trying to say it for 5 minutes.
It's very concerned.
Your concern.
Well, I'm going back to what Larry was talking about, the large concerns of different control systems, not only having two types to support, but having one basically cloud-based and the other one not. And so tomorrow or the next Zoom Room update, are they going to change the GUI and people aren't going to know where those buttons are? And, by the way, you have to get 5 buttons in before you can do one thing. And every GUI is the same no matter what, which is, you think that's good, but it's not good. And we have 2 or 3 different levels of GUIs. We got the button panels, you got the touch panels, and you got the real elaborate touch panels, if you will. That's kind of oversimplifying things. And you have this Zoom Room thing, and it's sitting there. And I swear, every time I go up to try to use one, I spend 3 or 4 seconds trying to figure out how to move a camera, which is going to lead us into our next topic later on.
Spoil it.
Well, and I think some of the discussion here, though, is that, yes, we all know that we are pretty entrenched in the things that we're doing. But if you're looking at some of these systems, again, back to my conversations the last couple of weeks with these other folks, is they're just now kind of dabbling in the let's get everything on the same page. Because they do have this shotgun smorgasbord of Pixie controllers. You remember those? Mm-hmm. And all these things. And so they are starting to dabble in this. And I've got to tell you, some of these, let's say, I'm gonna say the Atlona one, but like Atlona, look, if your entire building is Atlona, it's all cloud-based. They have the transport. They have the switching. They have everything you need. Now, it may not be as robust as we on this call would want it, but it's... And I used to not be an Atlona fan. And I don't think I'm a fanboy now, but I got to tell you, it's worth looking at. Because it could accomplish what you're trying to at a cheaper price point. Now, there are a bunch of hiccups in here, right? And that's something you have to evaluate yourself. One of the things that came up, like, Aurora has theirs, right? We've all seen that, and they're, they actually are a pretty giant company. Who else has got QSC is the one that's strange, because they are starting to make that change, right, from one to the other, where we were just talking about Biamp too, and they're very interesting. But yet, I think any of us that have put those in have also noticed that they have their shortfall. They're not quite, boy, they're close. And you see it, oh boy, I'm excited. But it's a worthy investment. So if you're a community college, if you're a small private school that are just now trying to maybe make that standardization principle, does it have to be Crestron? Does it have to be Extron? Can these again, forgive us, second tier
the other ones
control things work for you? And I think we're almost there with a lot of them. Now there's some work to be done, but I think it's there. They're almost there.
From the QSC standpoint, so we had that conversation. We tried a few things. Let's try this, try that. Here's a room sort of thing. We did a whole building. We said, screw it. We're going to do an entire building with QSC across the board, soup to nuts. And there's active learning spaces in there, Larry, and there's large presentation rooms, and there's conference rooms and all that. And it was done as a deliberate, hey, let's try this on a large scale to see how this compares to the Crestrons and Extrons of the world across the board. How does this compare? And we are finding this is very interesting. There's a lot of potential here. Because it's web based, it's JSON. You can tie it back into. We use Crestron Fusion for the Crestron. You can tie it back into that and have it report things. So it doesn't change the support structure at all, in the sense where one of the support techs is looking through Fusion and they can click the link and it goes to a custom web page written for the QSC system. So there's a lot more power there from the audio, especially from the audio, but the processing standpoint. Because Crestron, of all of them, has been notoriously weak on anything related to audio. You're lucky you can get their speakers to work. And, so you'll see across-the-board Crestron installations, and yet everything but the audio is Crestron sort of thing. But we tried QSC because you're right, Jamie. It was interesting. Like, well, this is an audio company. What are they doing? Oh, now they have a little video transport system. Now they have a control system. Now they have PTZ cameras, which are super smart and can recognize, because it's a direct USB device, can recognize software changes like, are you in an actual call right now, as opposed to just the system being on. Oh, you're in a call? We'll turn on the camera. Oh, the system is still on, but you've turned off. You're left the call. The cameras now go to privacy mode. So things like that it's part of their system. It's very intriguing to look at from an ecosystem perspective. I'm not saying that we're in the sense of like, 2 years from now, we're across the board QSC. That's absolutely not what we're saying. But from a standpoint of, hey, let's try this in a new building, just in an entire, space, it's showing a lot of promise. And the nice thing is, because we have a lot of QSC core, especially the Core 110s, just as a straight DSP in a room, well, that's also now a processor that we can do a lot of stuff with and have it talk to the Crestron processor. So our existing hardware with some software changes can now do more that it was never designed to do when it went in 2 or 3 years ago. But the software has matured enough that there is now value-added feature for zero cost to do that. I mean, programming time, obviously, but zero cost if I have to buy more widgets to have this happen. And now we can give somebody remote access to, an advanced kind of back of house sort of scenario where they can set it up on a laptop and drive all their microphones in real time sort of thing. And yes, there's ways to do that through other systems, but it didn't cost us a thing. And there we go. So there's a lot of potential there to look at these, not just from the standpoint of, I want to try a basic conference room, but some of these other ecosystems are moving along very quickly and are showing a lot of interesting things on them. So.
Well, this kind of rhymes with the conversation we were having earlier about how much easier it is to teach an AV technician programming versus a programmer AV. Like, it's easier when you're QSC and you understand audio systems and you understand processing and you understand the like real-time traffic and you understand all of the endpoints so intimately because you make them. It's easier to develop a holistic ecosystem that allows somebody to control those things remotely in a way that's actually useful.
I think
and as much as I drink the Kool-Aid, like QSC is the one I think is the mature solution. Like, it's been around a little bit. It's been put through the paces, and it's the one I actually want to get some in and test because I think that does offer a lot of possibilities with their audio processing that you could make a standard classroom out of it really and gain some real advantages over what I'm currently doing.
And so whether, Chris, in your instance, when you set out to do a building, right, how much, if any, thought was into the back end support of this, and like the awareness of having, like,
yes, that was there from day one. That was part of the exercise. Hey, if we were to do this, what do we need to worry about for support, for training? We have to get other people able to manipulate these systems. We have to have spare parts. We have to go through all of that, and that was kind of it was a deliberate choice made in this new academic health center. It's a combination hospital and teaching space. Was let's do it all this way because it is a opportunity in a large scale environment to try this out and see where are the holes in their ecosystem. How does this fit into our support structure? How does this fit our existing model? And the big thing for us was when we were able to, I would say to somebody who, if you put a piece of tape over a 7-inch Crestron panel and a 7-inch, actually I think it's an 8-inch QSC panel, and you put a piece of tape over that so they couldn't see the label. And we're able to replicate the UI in two different systems, but to the point where they were 99% identical. So to somebody walking into the space, the teaching, they didn't care. I'm over in this building and it's got a Crestron panel, I'm over in this building, it's got a QSC panel, but those buttons are Justin, you made the comment.
Standardized experience.
But these buttons are 99% the same. I don't care. I can laptop, boop, 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 start my class, start my Zoom call, off I go.
I can't do that with a Zoom panel.
Right. So that was kind of the thing when we were able to do that, we're like, hey, there's some potential here. And so we actually even have built out a model of our most basic classroom, our standard, run of the mill $18,000 classroom. Said, okay, here's what it costs in Crestron, because we crank these out all day long. Here's what a QSC one looks like. And it's a little bit more, like a little, and I say a little bit, like within like $2,000 sort of thing. So that is a cost.
That was another question. It's like, has it become a standard yet for you?
So yes. And we've recognized it is a little more. It's like $2,000 more. But for that $2,000, you get, this feature, that feature, all these advanced things. And most importantly, because QSC started as an audio company, and to Rachel, to your point, they understand audio. Their audio processing is top tier, bar none right now, in my opinion. But because it ties into the AV and the control system so well, and you can pull all this information, and now there's this thing called COVID, and we have to add video conferencing to all our classrooms. Well, now if we have a kick-ass audio processor in there that can do all this stuff, and you want to light up the system to do advanced audio conferencing with more than just like the two microphones in the front, your department wants to pay the extra money for the extra, $2 or $3 and get all the mics and cameras. We don't have to change a darn thing in the lecture, and it's good to go. It doesn't change anything in the sport. So it shows a lot of potential there. So again, I'm not saying we are like, we're all in, we're taking our Crestron stuff and throwing it in the river. And we're not to that point at all. But this is like, hey, 3 or 4 or 5 years from now, there's some interest here.
Well, and I think they've done something very smart in making it, in exposing it to Fusion, right? In making it so that you can have a Crestron house and still try. Ooh, sorry, my dog's trying to climb in my lap. That you can have a Crestron house and still try your QSC stuff without changing the way that you manage those components, because that's that Tower of Babel thing, that's the big barrier to adoption for a lot of these technologies. If you have to stand up a whole separate like parallel system for managing it, it will never be worth it.
And that's where I've really attempted, like I told you, I do have a wild, wild west of things, but one of my criterion has always been, if the controller is an absolute dud, can I use something else, right? So when I picked, it was 5-6 years ago, we picked the Extron all-in-one, the Crosspoint, DTP Crosspoint, right? And one of my things was, well, if I don't go with Crestron control for one reason or another, I can still use every other piece of this gear, just not the control. With the Atlona thing, if I decide velocity control is not it, all of their other stuff is controlled by every other control manufacturer. I can easily just redeploy a processor and we're rocked and ready to go. It really was a minimal effort to test something out. I did the same thing Chris did with the QSC deal. I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. I got a building. It was 2 rooms, but it was perfect. I'm going to give this a go. Let's see if it can hold its weight. And I found it was almost the pricing structure. By the time you factored in everything in the room, it was equal enough, right? The plus or minus was under 5%, so I didn't care, and we gave it a shot. And those are the ways that I look at it. And I just think that right now, if you're going through the process of choosing a system, that there are other options than just the 3.
So I've got a question for the group. I'm going to pollster you guys. So I've heard this from multiple schools, and I've heard it at our school. And the reason why we are pushing Zoom as a control system, which it's not me really, but we're investigating it, is that it is perceived, and I use that word strongly, that the Extron and Crestrons are way too complex to program. So this is kind of more of an IT thing, and I'm not agreeing with it, but that's the perceived. I had a conversation with a community school that was going to go from Crestron to QSC because QSC was saying that it was so much more simple and you don't have to custom program anything. I'm like, whoa, time out. That's not necessarily true at all.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that's true, yeah.
So I'm going to throw that grenade out there. Go ahead and answer that question. Why is it perceived to be more complex?
I've taught 5 students how to program Crestron, and they could all go out and do systems on their own.
I know it's not. It doesn't have to be complex, but it can be complex, but it depends on the programmer and what you're doing. But why is it perceived that everything under the Crestron umbrella is so complex that we don't want to do that anymore? We need to find something easier.
Because it's a proprietary language. Like that's it in a nutshell. The fact that everybody can't go out and get the tools and play around with it. You have to sign up for their courses. You either have to be a dealer or you have to have access to what it is. If it wasn't proprietary, like this stuff's cake. Like it's not hard at all.
Programmers themselves won't even look at Crestron as a true programming language. They say that's just glorified configuration. You're not actually programming. And so, because it's a skin, it's not really a language.
And even when you open it up, it's still just basic stuff. Like it's not hard. It's just the fact it has its own name. It's its own thing.
I think it's a misplaced definition of programming is harder. It is not. It is a misplaced definition. What is different. Harder is, well, no, it has nothing to do with the program. What is harder is all of the other things. Video switching, audio switching, transports, all these. What's a relay do? How does I/O work? Look, when you work with Zoom Rooms or that Utology, is that what it is? That PC-based one that they've been pushing? Anyway.
Yeah, maybe.
But what they like about these is that most of them run on, you plug in a network cable, you plug in a USB cable, and it's just another peripheral. That is something they're used to. It's just a mouse and a keyboard and a webcam. And so that's what I find most of the time is not the programming is harder. It's as Rachel was saying earlier, it is the whole picture of AV that's hard. And you have to understand that to program AV. Whereas these PC-based ones, you just treat it like a PC with these weird endpoints, and if that camera doesn't work, you just get another camera and another USB cable, and
you
boop,
design around the control system instead of designing around the room and the audience, and that's a problem.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Jamie just said. Back when I programmed all the time, the hardest part was getting the volume bar on the touch panel to match exactly what the range limit was that I was trying to do. Like, it's taking the audio and the video and making and converting it over. And I think that's why it seems hard.
Conversions and things like that.
There's a couple pieces in this. I think one is kind of staffing and skill sets, and kind of do I have to have this acknowledgement of this additional oddball skill set that we're going to call a programmer. It doesn't meet any of our traditional criteria of a programmer, but I guess AV has this unique programmer thing. But okay, so organizations are going to look at that real hard and say, well, wait a minute, this off-the-shelf thing adheres to our standard programming languages, so that seems to be more programming for us. So it makes more sense to kind of have that skill set already and not create a different silo for that. And I wonder, like, you know, it kind of goes back to like, what do you really need to accomplish? And like, what's the most efficient way for you to do it? And so and can you do it in scalable and supportable ways? And
so does that perception change if Crestron's only HTML5 and that's all you program in?
Yeah. Wait till you get into that and find out it doesn't use standard tags for
really.
HTML5.
Oh, there you go.
That's like Extron's Python. It's Python, but with different definitions.
They've always been bastardized version of whatever coding language that they were.
Yeah. So, Justin, I think to answer your question, I think that perception is, I think it's true in the sense where that traditional AV systems are more complex, and to configure and program one has that perception. I don't think it's unfounded. I think also a lot of that's the fault of those of us in the AV industry who have tried to like try to make things look as complex as possible, because that's how we maintain our jobs, sort of thing. It's like, well, no, you can't just have IT people in here doing this. Yeah. You know, no, you got to know all this stuff to really make this happen. But no, it's not the case at all. So I think, especially today, as so much of, and we'll bring this up on an upcoming show, but as so much of things has become PC centric, that I think it has commoditized AV to the point where you don't need, for a lot of scenarios, for your standard meeting space, your standard teaching space, you don't need all the bells and whistles to Mark, to your point, to accomplish what you're trying to do, what type of information you're trying to share, what type of knowledge you're sharing. You don't need all that stuff. And so like these configurable kind of cookie cutter systems that the IT department can crank out are probably 100% acceptable and will do exactly what you need.
As long as they stay in their lane.
Well, but maybe. But there are those spaces, like Larry said, he's uncomfortable trying out one of these other control systems because he wants to make sure it'll do a full active learning space. Well, that may be outside the realm of what a Zoom room can do. Yeah. But a Zoom room was probably never designed to do that. But I'm sure somewhere out there, someone's going to write in and say, hey, we've got Zoom rooms running active learning.
We tried that, and it works great.
Don't tell them. There's probably a primer on their website.
Best of luck to that. But I think it's about matching the capabilities of the space to the control system, or to the AV system that you're doing. And maybe that's where that perception comes from. So any last thoughts on control systems? Because we've run this one pretty well into the ground, I think. And it's a big topic. We're not going to come up with any brand new insights today. So aside from if you're interested in trying out one of these, I'd say reach out to one of the manufacturers. Any one of them will send you some stuff and you can play with it and they'll walk you through. And a lot of them have excellent online courses to get you started on it, and they're worth exploring. Absolutely. So that said, let's push the other commercial button. Do you have a question for the AV Super Friends? A topic to suggest? Or were we just really, really wrong on something and you'd like to give us a piece of your mind? Well, don't just yell at your computer. Send us an email and we'll actually read it. mailbag@avsuperfriends.com. We're always looking for good ideas to discuss openly. And if your message is just full of great stuff, we might just invite you on the show. mailbag@avsuperfriends.com. So for our last topic today, this is something that's been, I guess, coming to the forefront. I've been paying more attention to it. I've seen some product demos in recent weeks and months, which has made me believe that this is a thing now, and that is the question of do PTZ cameras, and when I say PTZ, I mean a traditional pan, tilt, and zoom camera with a large motorized head. So when we put a video conferencing capability into a larger space, you say, I need to have something that can move the camera around and aim at different people and go to different presets and zoom way in and do all this stuff. But when looking at spaces now, do these PTZ cameras that we're putting in there, do they really need to PT and Z? Or are cameras now smart enough to have a static image raster and simply manipulate that image digitally within that raster and get you a good enough 1080 or 720 or whatever high resolution image you're looking for within that. So the camera itself does not need to move. Recently I've run into several projects where people have asked, and these are older existing spaces, but they've asked why the camera is always kind of swinging wildly around, and it's distracting to see that happening. And you know, do we need to still do that? So what are you all seeing out there for modern cameras? If you're buying a camera in 2021, what are you looking at? I mean, when I say, like, I assume you have a crummy webcam. That's your basic. So when you go between crummy webcam to what's the next level up, what are you seeing out there for spaces?
I'm seeing even some like not so crummy webcams, like standard USB connected webcams that have the kind of electronic ePTZ capability you're talking about. I mean, I think this can be a short conversation. Like, yeah, for a lot of spaces, especially smaller spaces, you get a 4K webcam with ePTZ capability, and you can capture what you need to capture. Some of them even have dual outputs. You can capture 2 shots at once. So you can have like your like close up shot and your wide shot being captured by a single like static camera and toggle between them like you were doing a multicam shot. The capability is there. Like it's ready, it's baked, it's pretty cool. And you can achieve some almost like broadcast quality effects with some of these really pretty affordable little webcam devices these days. I do think that there are use cases where you want full PTZ, like especially if you're doing something like, I know this is not like the favorite thing of most of the people on this call, but if you're doing something like automated lecture capture, I don't think you want to do like where you're tracking the speaker with the camera. Don't think you want to do that with an ePTZ camera, because you want a wider field of view to start with. Like you want the camera to be able to both physically track, and you want it to be capturing a wide shot that you can select your 720 or 1080 shot out of. But for a lot of applications, especially like huddle room applications, yeah, ePTZ is great. I don't know why you'd do anything different.
My question is, do we need PTZ when we spec PTZ, and how do you know?
That's a whole different question.
So that's kind of my topic. Yeah. Is when I'm thinking about PTZ, you know, you got these Zoom room things that we're deploying that require USB cameras only. That's how they're controlled. So now you got these stupid USB extenders that you got to deal with. And then my whole point to our team is, well, why are we doing this? And nobody can tell me an answer, because we can't find the metrics if the teacher is moving the camera around as he or she moves in the front of the room, because to me that doesn't make sense.
The answer is
like,
no.
So the instructor's going over here and hitting a preset and then running back from the lectern and going over there. It's like, this is stupid. And so my whole point is, we need to collect metrics on Zoom interfaces to see what people are actually doing with these Zoom interfaces, leading to this PTZ discussion, right?
Yeah, I think it's a couple different things at large here. Chris, you said, do we need to have a motorized thing? Well, obviously, no. We don't have to have it. What are we solving for?
Right.
In the context you're talking, Justin, that look at our deployments of cameras need to have functionality to change their position.
Yes.
Yes, because there are different criteria that we're trying to do. I'm not tracking a professor around a room. That's not why I even provide them in the first place. Our cameras are primarily there to capture, for IMAG purposes and to make that accessible to online. It is not for chasing somebody around a room. And kind of going back to the core of that question is, do I need to have movement? No, because my instructors are not going to actually drive that. They are not producers. They are not directors.
Exactly.
They're instructors. And so everything's defined to the ability of, can I recall a couple presets? If I can do that with a non-motorized, I will do it non-motorized.
Yep, absolutely.
I think that's the key. Like, right, the way I've kind of defined it is, if I don't have a person paid to move the camera, don't move the camera. Like, if I don't have a student, if I don't have a producer director, I don't want a PTZ camera in that space. Like, I am intrigued by the ePTZs and some of the ones now that are getting a lot better. I watched a demo of one of them yesterday it wasn't as quick as someone moving and it didn't frame, or it didn't track, but it framed, and it did a pretty good job. And so for lecture capture or conference rooms where they're not moving around the room, they're pretty much there and it gets the appropriate shot, I'm okay with that. But the days of always speccing a $3,000 camera that PTZ's in the back of the room, those are over.
Yeah, I've liked the idea of the ePTZ for a long time. We purchased the Panasonic, the AW-HE2s way back when, right? The pan and scan, right? Where you take that full image set. And, you know, originally we put all the little controls on there to move it themselves. Nobody ever does that. We all know that. But I did put 3 presets, you know, like podium close, presets. Podium wide, or whole front. And they get to choose those 3. And the nice thing about like those HE2s is it was instant. It was such an instantaneous transition. The PTZ Optics one, it's probably the one Rachel was referring to earlier that has the dual outputs. I put that into a 1-button studio so that they could basically get a 2-shot from a single camera in a single point. Now, all of these things have their space, right? I think once you get to a large enough room, you probably need motors and real lenses and things. But I think in a regular classroom, the ePTZ is a great option, and they're so powerful. And if it's now that they have the 4K image, and you can take that 1080 or 720 cut down of it, you can really do a lot with it with just simple triggers and simple preset calls. And to Mark's point, when you need to move it to do something, you can. When you have that obstinate professor that just has to write on the whiteboard, so you create the whiteboard button and they just click it, and now everybody can see it, right? And those are the reasons I use it. And I like getting it off the desk, because the webcam on the desk gets destroyed. You put this thing up and out of the way, they don't get destroyed.
Yeah, so Larry, you mentioned it, and I think we were on the same call. So this was the Vadio and Teleshot that I saw with the demo the other day. It's impressive as hell to see this thing operate, and yeah, it does tracking in the sense where it does framing, and you have to define these zones and set it up, sort of thing. But you put this thing at the back of the room, and I think this one's unique in the sense where it has an actual zoom lens in it, but then the Z is there, but it P's and T's within the just the video raster itself. But those two things in combination means you don't have a moving head, you don't have a camera swinging around, but it does frame within those zones. So, you know, like you said, Jamie, I've got this whiteboard zone identified, I've got the lectern zone identified, and within that, it does a pretty reasonable job. And I think what is interesting and intriguing to me is that the cost on these the performance has gone up, and the cost has come down to the point where now you're thinking, for a lot of spaces, if it's a medium-sized room or smaller, I can put one of these things and it's 50, 60 feet away. It looks pretty good, and I don't have to ever worry about having, like Larry, like you said, I don't have to worry about having somebody in there to steer this. It will kind of drive itself, and it does the job and gets you a better experience than either, like you just said, Jamie, the crappy webcam sitting on the monitor, which people throw off to the side, or they twist around because they don't want to be on camera or any of that. But or the big expensive PTZ at the back of the room that requires a full control system, or requires someone to set that up, or requires step mats or triggers, or the little pendants to track it, sort of thing. So, and I probably should have said at the outset, I will be the first one to say, by all means, the larger the lens, the better the glass, the larger the sensor, the better the lighting. You're going to get a better image every single time. One of those is going to make an ePTZ system look like a toy in comparison. However, I think what we're talking about here is general application of these, that for most of what you're trying to do, and Mark, you keep bringing this up, what are you trying to get across in the space? Are we shooting in a studio? Because if you're shooting in a studio, that's different. But if you're putting these in every conference room and classroom you have because you need to have hybrid capability and you don't know where people are going to be, then one of these ePTZs seems like it might be a way to go and reduce complexity quite a bit. So
striving for adequacy.
Yeah,
striving for adequate.
The motorized thing does kind of lend itself to it's a little bit more of a Swiss Army knife of sorts. It does solve a specific set of problems if you're kind of getting a standard product that you can deploy across a bunch of different areas and you don't know what it's going to be, you're going to get more of a tool set than necessarily out of just the ePTZ sometimes. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, some of this cracks me up because we've kind of come full circle. Because how many of you have like the old, or even messed with the old like Sony EVI 50s? Some of the original motorized, right?
old ones.
Yep.
And they had auto tracking and auto framing built into the camera. Did you ever play with it? Like
Not
it
a
is
lot,
just as
no.
good as some of the ones that are coming out now that have desktop
Really?
drivers. But those old, and they're composite and S-video cameras, but they're on there. And if you can dig one up and you power that thing up, if you go into the menu structure with the remote, which you got to find the remote, you go into the menu structure, there is an auto framing feature, and you get to draw the little boxes on the picture, and it will remember where to go. It blows my mind that, that 20 years ago this camera was doing this, and
so
then
what
it
you're
kind of went
saying,
away,
Jamie,
and it came back.
Sony's
and,
engineers got lazy and didn't develop on it, and everybody got caught up
No,
till
they
20
did.
years
So
later.
Justin, what they did is they moved that out to their outboard processor. So they
Yeah.
removed it from the cameras, and now you have to buy the processors.
Yeah,
to do it,
well, they
so.
stopped doing it at like the EVI 70s, and then it went the way of mini discs and PlayStations and things where it was a wonderful product that they couldn't market well, so it just kind of went away.
Yeah, so I think it's like I said, I wanted to raise this question because it's traditionally when you look at a classroom, you had two options. You say, I'm going to put a little webcam at the front of the room, and Jamie, like you said, those get beat up, destroyed, lost, stolen, whatever. They get, and even when they're working, I wouldn't say they're not even adequate. They're like, there's an image, but it's pretty crap. But the only other option was, now I'm putting in a $4,000 PTZ at the back of the room. I need to run an SDI cable, and I have to have power back there, and I'm running control systems to it, and I've got to set up presets, and someone has to recall those, and it just adds a layer of complexity that maybe we don't want in 500 rooms across campus. But now it looks like there's some options in there that get us. Maybe it's good enough. Maybe it's something that is the cost is lower. Some of those features are there. Is this an option for wide scale deployment? And I think, frankly, in a lot of cases, there's potential there. So something to look at if you haven't already. I'm just going to rattle off a few here. Logitech Meetup, Hudley has several of them. Vadio and Teleshot. There's a bunch out there. Reach out to your reps. They're happy to send them out and let you play with these things. I think they're interesting technologies as they develop. So
if you don't have one, you will need one.
Or at least get one. Be familiar with it. So, well, that's it for us. We're out. Well, we've managed to ruin yet another episode of AV Super Friends Off the Rails. You can contact us with questions, topic ideas, or general complaints at mailbag@avsuperfriends.com. If you complain loud enough, we might just invite you on the show.
Nice work, everyone. Sharp broadcast. Really good. Everyone on the floor as well. Really a lot of hustle. I liked it.
The opinions expressed by the AV Super Friends are solely those of the individuals and do not represent their respective institutions, organizations, companies, or clients.